So, hello, my name is Emily Ryan, and I'm going to walk us through some seed saving exercises today. I think this is a really good indoor activity, sort of at this time of year, actually, when things are a little less welcoming outside. And I want to thank the Emily Taylor Center, Megan Boulong, for having me today to do this. This is sort of a passion project of mine, I guess, so I'm excited to be able to share some of it with you. So I think I might start off probably with like the easiest, and I'm very biased admittedly, but I think all of this is thrilling actually. So I'll start off with the easiest thing and try to make some interesting highlights along the way. So the first thing that I'll talk about today is a vegetable that grows. I'll talk about it for a second, see if you can guess as I go. So it grows on a stalk, and the stalk is of course taller throughout the year. It just kind of ended in terms of its growing season when it got cold, I guess, but it really likes the hot weather, and it's something that as it grows, it sort of shoots off pods, I guess is the word, starting at the base, of course, and then as it gets taller, more and more. So I'll go ahead and reveal now if you have an idea. You can guess if you want of what I'm going to talk about. But so these are pods that would have grown off the bottom of the fruit or of the plant. And the way that I usually go about saving these is very unexciting, is that I ignore them, basically. So I guess one thing I try to keep in mind always as I'm trying to think about seed saving is that like nature wants seeds to produce and save. So ultimately all I'm trying to do is like organize that process for myself so that I can actually collect some of what nature's sharing all the time. And I should say also, if you have any questions as we go, I think I can read them, so feel free. So anyway, these are okra pods that would grow off the stalk. And one thing that I love about okra pods is this, literally I just cut this off last night. So it's one that I ignored or forgot about realistically. And I try to save them because at the very beginning of the season, if I let them get mature and then sort of get to the point of expiring on the plant, they will mature all the way, produce seeds, which is the natural process for the plant, and then we can collect the seeds. So you can probably hear this. Okra is pretty exciting because it creates like a rattle. And the reason for that is that if you can see, I'm going to try to zoom so you can see this. So each of the sort of veins in an okra pod is basically just like a gutter for a bunch of seeds. So each of these veins, like 1, 2, you can see all of these separate veins, has an entire row of seeds that just really wants to fall out. So to save seeds from okra, it is literally one step once you get the pod off, which is just sort of like pry apart, show you, the bottom. This is going to fall because I'm trying to show you what's happening, but pry apart the bottom pieces, and you can use a plate. This is where a plate or your hand or something will come in handy. You could just put an envelope, frankly, at the bottom of this, because they have these like anatomical gutters, and they'll just like run right out. So that's all there is to it in terms of saving okra seed. And you might want to pry each kind of side off a little bit, one at a time. And I'll tell you, I have like 30 seeds in my hand right now, just from letting them fall, gravity basically. So what I would do if I weren't trying to show you on a video is just do this over a plate and pull apart each. And then okra is so easy that before I even was intentionally seed saving, I realized I was doing it. So I haven't bought okra seeds in years because, I mean, that it's really easy to collect and they're dry already. So one thing that I should keep repeating is seeds, you have to let seeds get dry all the way before you put them in an envelope or package them in any way, because a couple of reasons. One, if they're wet, they can mold or rot easily. 2, they can germinate. They can get faked out because it's inside, and so it's warm, and so for them, they think, oh, it's spring already. And so if they have the right amount of moisture, they might germinate and start growing in a place you don't want them to grow at a time of year you don't want them to grow. So that was okra, pretty easy. Also pretty easy, also in the vegetable, although if you want to get into it, I guess fruit family, are beans, and those are also so easy. Literally, again, just leaving it on the plant and letting it get past its prime in terms of what you'd want to eat, and then just letting it dry out on the plant. And again, just peeling, in this case, we'll peel apart, see if I can get that brighter. Peel apart a pod, and it doesn't have quite as many seeds as okra, which is just like a party in a pod. But they're like beans that you will be able to get out of the pod, sort of like the way you get peas when you're eating them, frankly. Beans do that too, of course, in that there are many in a pod. So sometimes, some varieties of beans actually, you aren't supposed to eat the pod. The pod version is poisonous, but if you let it dry on the plant and then you harvest the dry beans, this is like true for some heirloom varieties, the dry beans are good to eat. So just make sure if you're buying seeds that you check that on the packaging. Hello, new people joining. So just a quick recap, we have done okra so far and beans. And at this point, I want to move on. Oh, I've got one more vegetable I forgot. I had corn. It's not hard either. All of these are sort of basic 101 level vegetables. So corn. This is corn that's grown specifically to not be eaten as sweet corn, not corn on the cob, but rather corn that is meant to be popcorn or ground up to make cornmeal. So this particular variety is called Glass Gem, and the reason for that is that it looks kind of like stained glass, in that all these colors present themselves. I'm going to show you in a second, just here. 1 second. Set down the things I'm already done with. One thing I forgot to mention on your list of things you need to do this is space, and I don't have a lot. So, okay, so corn. Here's this variety that I was just mentioning. It's called Glass Gem, and the kernels are all different colors. They're really beautiful. The hardest part about corn is just not like getting it before the raccoons get it, and especially hard for corn because again, as was true with the other two things I mentioned, what you want to do is basically just leave it on the plant until it is totally mature, and then past that point, because it has to get dried out. So that's how dry that is. If I hit it with my fingernail, you can just hear it tapping. So this again is a situation where the plant wants to produce, so it will try to drop the kernels on its own. But if you're trying to contain and keep the kernels so that you can plant them next year, you basically harvest it when the husk will still be on it. So this is a situation where I've pulled the husk back before it got totally dry. That way it would dry outside of the wet husk and not get moldy. But as far as, this is going to make a mess. So again, this is a situation, if I weren't trying to show it to you, I would just be doing it directly over a bowl or a plate. You can simply just pry these off one at a time. And that is all there is to it in terms of, like, these corn kernels are seeds. So next summer or spring, you can plant these. And that's future corn. Corn on the cob would be a similar process. It's just that, like sweet corn that you would eat that way, as opposed to corn that is intended to be dried. It's just that you would have to let that sweet corn go through the process of drying as if it were to be dried, not as if it were to be eaten as sweet corn. So basically the theme that we're going with so far is just letting plants live intact without interrupting their process until they're basically expired on the plant. I don't have any exceptions to that actually today, I don't think. So, okay, next we're going to jump into the flower family. And this is one of my favorite flowers for a lot of reasons. So it is one that has a particular odor, and because of that tends to help pests stay away. Particularly good to grow companion planting with tomatoes because it keeps aphids away. But I've also noticed here, especially in Kansas, that it is really good at keeping the Japanese beetles off of tomato plants, and because they just love the marigolds so much. So this is a marigold intro. In fact, they sort of just like, it's crazy, just they like dive bomb into the flower and then just stay there, and that's how they live their life. Which means that they don't live for very long, I guess. But anyway, this is a good flower. Sorry, I'm rambling. A good flower to plant alongside other things because its particular odor keeps pest insects away. So, as has been true for the others, here's what happens with marigold. I picked this last night. This is what it looks like, of course, when you're like, pretty, I want to keep that in a bouquet or whatever you're using it for. And then, of course, if you let it sit on the plant a little longer, it gets to this stage. This is totally, I'm so sorry. Okay, I think we're good. Let me make sure. Sorry. Okay. So this gets to a point of being totally dry, and basically, so as a flower, what you want to do first is just kind of tug off all of the, what used to be the petals, this orange part. So I'm just going to pull those all off gently, at once. And I mean, if you can use those because they're still smelly for potpourri or something like that if you want to. I probably will just compost them in this case. So you're left then with this little bud, which looks sort of like a thistle in terms of its shape. And then the seeds are in here. So in order to save seeds for marigold, you want to pry it apart carefully because there are like hundreds of seeds in here. So you just pry it apart, and each of those tiny little needle things is a seed. They're really interesting looking seeds, so they're kind of just going to fall out as soon as I loosen this seed head. I love, okay, I'm admittedly just geeking out here a little bit, but I love the structure, like thinking about the structure of different seeds and thinking about, you know, in all seeds case, the idea is to get to the ground so that they can grow. And sometimes that's because they're relying on like a bird or a pollinator or some kind of other disperser to get the seeds from one place to the next. And other times it's simply just a matter of gravity, dropping them onto the ground so they can winter and then be ready in the spring. So here's what it looks like to be a marigold seed. They're all just sort of like needly, and to imagine that this one seed, can you even see that? Yeah, one seed can produce a like bush of a flower basically that ends up being like 4 feet tall with, you know, hundreds of marigold heads. That's really just incredible. Okay, so that's marigolds. I think I'll just do 2 more for the sake of time. I know you're all on lunch and things like that. Okay, so this one I'll do because it's a pretty common garden flower, and so it's likely that you'll find them around in a friend's garden or in your own or something at this time of year. And also I just learned something else about them this year, so I'm excited to share that too. So zinnias, pretty common, pretty popular flower to grow. Once again, a situation where you're going to want to leave it on the plant a lot longer than you would if you were harvesting it to put in a bouquet or make a flower pressing or something like that with. This is kind of an ideal specimen as far as seed saving goes with zinnias. And since zinnias are actually a compound flower, they have 2 different forms or ways of harvesting seeds. So there's the ray flowers, which are all along the outside. A sunflower is also a compound flower. So when you think about like a sunflower, you think about the yellow petals. That's one form of flower that sunflowers have. That's the ray flower. There's also, being a compound flower, they also have interior flowers, which are disc flowers. So basically each, if you can think about like a sunflower seed head or sunflower head, each of the seeds that happens in the head is the result of an individual flower. Same is true for zinnias. So basically this head would have been covered in, like one at a time, a ring of yellow flowers. So they were concentric. First they would form around the outer edge of the inside, and then coming in from there periodically throughout time. So as this plant has aged, it has had a ring of disc flowers, and then another ring of disc flowers, another ring of disc flowers, and each of those rings has hoped to be pollinated by a bee or ant or something like that. And then the idea would be that each of those flowers would generate its own seed. As well, these external ray flowers are generating their own seeds. So one way to get these ray flower seeds off is just to tug very gently. And if they're ready, there will be seeds attached to them. So these are the first seeds that form on a zinnia, these this exterior ring of ray flowers. And then once the seed head is dried all the way on the plant, you should be able to start peeling away the layers as the disc flowers would form on the inside. And each of these tiny little white silks is attached to another seed. So That's if, you know, perfect pollination has happened. So these are the interior seeds. You see those? Each of those little seeds is a seed as well. So then this would be another situation where we want to keep it in a dry place, so let it cure and dry out totally. A dry place that's not in direct sunlight and is in a relatively stable temperature, such as an indoor climate. Okay, so then we'll just do one more, I think. Another flower that's really common in people's gardens, and I've seen in even the sort of beds that the Lawrence Parks and Recreation Department plants in planters around town, is Celosia. So the shape of Celosia that's probably most popular is this sort of like brain shape. You've probably seen that around. And at the same time, there are other forms of Celosia, like this one, which is called a plume, pompous plume, grows in these sort of stalk shapes. It's actually easier to see seeds forming in this, but I will show you where they show up in both cases. So the easiest way to save seeds from Celosia is simply to, once they have reached maturity on the plant, which is, you can tell because they start to lose their color, they start to turn white and dry out, just sort of like any flower starts to dry out. And then what I do at that point is just harvest, cut a bunch of the flower heads off, and then set them on a plate and let them be inside in a dry place, again at a relatively steady temperature. And then every so often I just come and sort of like pick them up and tap them, and seeds just fall off in, you know, dozens at a time, hundreds probably ultimately, or what I have. This is, I mean, this black patch here is all seeds that have fallen off of the dried Celosia flowers. So this is something you can do, frankly, if you go to the farmer's market and just get a bouquet. Most of the time the flowers, especially at this time of year, the flowers are aged enough that they will be mature enough to be able to produce seeds. And so I have done this actually with flowers from the farmer's market before, where I set Celosia heads out when they're kind of like at their peak for bouquet, and let seeds fall off of them like that. And I've planted them and grown my own crop from that before. So a little note, I guess, about that is if you are interested in saving seeds, I wouldn't waste my time doing that with vegetables or flowers that I've bought at the grocery store. However, if you are buying produce from somebody that you know in town, like a local farmer, or if you're just exchanging things with another gardener friend, it's very likely those seeds would be totally viable. It's helpful if you know where the seeds came from and know the positions of the company that you got them from, or that they originally came from. This is a whole political thing, which I can get into like at another time. But some seeds are engineered specifically so that they won't have a second generation, which is a whole thing about copyrights and commercialization of seed production. Look up Monsanto if you're curious to know more about that. But anyway, most of the stuff that you're buying here at the local farmer's market or at or from gardeners, as I mentioned, that you might know, would be a healthy heirloom style seed that would be able to produce again. So I think maybe I'll just leave you with this as my last sort of show and tell for today. Hopefully the Zoom will allow me to do that. So this is Celosia, as I mentioned. Let's see if I can zoom. If you get really close, it's not very clear. Okay, so you can kind of see those blurry black dots in the middle. Those are seeds. So it's really fascinating to know that basically Celosia has like hundreds of little, each of these tiny little things that juts out is a tiny little flower. Again, it's a compound flower. And so basically each of these tiny little flowers has its own pocket that has probably 5 or 6 of those little tiny black seeds. And then, you know, they're like smaller than poppy seeds even to look at them. And again, they produce these massive flowers each year. So just a stunning thing that I'm really excited about. I think I'll wrap it there, but thank you so much for tuning in. And I think this is posted on the YouTube channel for the Emily Taylor Center for Women and Gender Equity. Thanks again to Meg and Boo Long, and happy seed saving indoor garden activities. Bye.